Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. People are still logging in, and we're seeing the names still showing up. So we'll just give it another minute or so, and we'll get started.
Well, good morning, everybody. I think we've got enough people in the chat room that we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today for how to use the FDOT Section 4F tool. Before we get going, I just want to make sure that everyone keeps themselves muted with webcams off. If you do have any questions, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box. Stephanie's going to be monitoring the box throughout the webinar, and we'll be stopping periodically to answer some of your questions. We do ask that you bear with us if there happen to be any technical difficulties. We're going to be demonstrating the tool using videos, and they may come in a little choppy depending on your internet connection, but we are recording this session, so if you happen to have a poor connection or if you get kicked out of the room, we'll be recording and we'll be posting, so you'll be able to watch it in full at a later date. Can we hit the next slide, Ruth? So I'm Matt Marino. I am a project delivery coordinator and the state cultural resource specialist at OEM. And I am joined by at least two other people on the list today. And I'm going to pause myself and let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Ruth.
Hi, I'm Ruth Roaza. I'm the environmental process analyst at OEM, and I will be demonstrating the new Section 4F tool this morning. And Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Clemens, and I'm one of the developers on the SWEPT application and Section 4F tool, and I also staff the help desk.
And I'm sure Roy is somewhere out there navigating cyberspace, finding his way to the chat room. So he will be joining us as well. And we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So today we're going to be walking you through the process of generating Section 4F documentation within SWEPT for review and approval by OEM. We're going to be using two different scenarios to illustrate the data entry process, and we're going to show you how resources are granted approval by OEM, and then we should also have some time for additional discussion at the end of the walkthrough. Next slide, please. So the tool was designed so that you can record all of your project Section 4F information in one place. The information that you enter into the tool can be sent to OEM for review and approval within SWEPT. So you don't have to worry about filling out multiple forms in Word and PDFing them and submitting them through ERC for OEM review and then getting the approval and tracking down signatures. This entire process now is going to take place within SWEPT. The documentation that you generate in the tool can be downloaded as a separate PDF with just your 4F information, and it also can be automatically uploaded into your environmental document, and we will show you what the documentation package looks like. So this slide illustrates the approval process in SWEPT. So your first circle here, you've already entered your information in the tool, and the approval process depends upon the outcome that you choose for the resource. So if we go up, we are looking at applicability decisions. So those are your no uses, not applicable, or your exemption exception. If you have one of those outcomes and you fill out your information and you hit the button and the resource gets sent to OEM for review and approval. And for these applicability decisions, they only need to be approved by the SME, which in this case is going to be me or Roy. So they'll send them, you will send them to us and we will review. And if everything looks good, we will enter a concurrence determination date and that resource is good to go. You will receive a notification when the SME gives their approval for that resource. So if we go back to the outcome section, if you have an approval decision, which is a de minimis or programmatic, also an individual, but we don't do individual 4Fs within the tool because those require their own separate analysis. But de minimis or programmatics require approval by the OEM director. So the process for that involves you sending the resource to the CRM expert, so me or Roy, and we will review. And if we think it's ready, we'll enter a concurrence date. And that means it is ready for approval. That doesn't grant it approval because it still needs to be approved by the OEM director at the time when the environmental document is approved. So we'll say that this looks ready for approval, and then when you are ready for the approval, the PDF is automatically uploaded into SWEPT so that when you get to if it's a type 1, Jason, the OEM director, is going to approve the de minimis, and then the district is going to approve the type 1. If it's a type 2, the OEM director's approval of the environmental document also grants approval to your section 4F de minimis or programmatic. So that all happens at one time. Now, if you wanted to send us a resource for review before the public opportunity to comment, you can do that. And there's an option in the tool that says that the public has had the opportunity to comment or they haven't yet, but that will happen in the future. You don't have to wait for OEM review for after that opportunity to comment. You can send us that resource before and we can say, yes, this looks good, provided you update it with your public hearing information, and then you can keep moving forward. So we will pause here and take any questions that we have in the chat box before we move on.
Okay. Wendy would like to know, are there review timeframes set in the tool?
The review timeframes are not set in the tool, but the important thing to know is that review timeframes haven't changed at all. They are all going to be the same as they are now. Sometime down the line, we may add that feature to the tool, but right now it's not automatically tracked by the tool, but the timeframes are the same.
Okay, thanks. Wendy would also like to know, is the PDC involved in the review?
The PDC is involved in that they will also get notifications, but it is the subject matter experts, that is me and Roy. We are the ones who have to review the information. So the PDC is free to review the documentation, but the approval is going to be granted by me or Roy and then Jason. So they are involved, but they are not the main set of eyes that review the documents, and they are not granting approvals for the documents.
Okay. Gwen would like to know, does the tool allow OEM to provide edits to the text?
The tool allows OEM to enter comments into a text box, but I do not think that we can edit the text for you. And if I'm wrong there, I'll let Ruth or Stephanie chime in and give you the right answer.
Okay. Next question is from Gordon. When will the new process take effect? Will projects currently in SWEPT be grandfathered in?
So the new tool is going to be ready for your use on Monday, but it's not mandatory. We strongly encourage that you start using it for your new projects, but the old process with forms is still alive and well, and we're not going to force this on you without a long period of getting used to it. I can't tell you when this is going to become mandatory, but I do know that it's going to have to wait until we update the Section 4F chapter of the PD&E manual to account for the tool, so that's still going to be a long way off. So we strongly encourage you to start using the tool as soon as possible, but you don't have to yet. And if you have projects that already have Section 4F documentation in forms, I suggest just sticking to the forms for that project and waiting until you get a new project that you can begin in the tool.
Okay. Craig would like to know, where can we find the PDF?
The PDF can be generated in the Section 4F tool, which is within SWEPT. You use the sidebar to get to it. And I'll ask Ruth to step in here, but I think the PDF gets automatically uploaded into your Section 4F folder in your project file. Does that sound right, Ruth?
That is correct. And if you've associated with it environmental document, it's also linked under the supporting documents for that particular approval.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll be showing some examples of that during the demonstration.
Thanks, Ruth. Next question is from Christine. What happens if you have a written de minimis document that was previously approved by OEM when the project was in the PD&E phase? Now in design, the de minimis has to be updated to include new changes. Do we have to prepare a de minimis in this tool?
So I think the question is, if you have an original de minimis determination with the old forms and you have to update it, so you have to do it in the new tool. The answer to that question is no. Like I said, we're not making this mandatory anytime soon. So if you need to update or even redo a de minimis or any kind of determination and you want to use the old forms, you can still do that. But I think maybe there's another question hidden in there, and that would be if you get an approved resource, any type of outcome, and then you have to go back and change it because of something maybe changed in design. If OEM approved an outcome for a resource already and you need to make a change to it, you can remove that approval and make edits to that resource and then request OEM approval again, so that you don't have to start from the beginning and generate what essentially would be a new form. You can go into the existing approved document, remove that approval, update the resource, and then send it to us for approval again.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Sherry would like to know, do the OWJ letters have to be signed in DOA before sending the DOA for review and approval?
So we're not, really none of this can be described as separate DOAs because the information in the resource builds on itself. So if you needed to do a DOA because you really don't know exactly what the outcome for that resource is going to be, then you can still do what you would normally do, which is call me or Roy and we can have a discussion about it. But when you send something for us to approve that requires OWJ concurrence, let's say it's a temporary occupancy exemption where the OWJ has to concur with the conditions of a temporary occupancy. In that case, we need to see an OWJ letter that is signed that says, yes, they concur. We're not going to approve that resource with an OWJ letter that was just sent and you haven't heard a response back yet.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Mike would like to know, will this eliminate the DOA process and/or documentation?
Yes, it will. So it eliminates the DOA process because you don't have to fill out a DOA form and send it to us for approval before you can take action on your actual outcome. But the intent of a DOA, which is we have this resource and we're not exactly sure how we're going to impact it, so we need to do a little bit of preliminary research to figure that out first. You can still do that in the tool. You are free to move throughout the tool, and I think this answer will make more sense once Ruth kind of shows you what it looks like, but you are free to move throughout the tool and predict what the outcome will be. And if that changes, you can always go back and change the outcome. So you can fill out your form and say, here's this resource. I think it's going to be a de minimis. I'm going to talk to Matt or Roy and see if they agree. And we can go in there and look without necessarily requiring you to send it to us for approval. We can just go in and look and say, yeah, I think that does look like a de minimis, or maybe we can get an exemption or exception, or even a no use, something like that. So the intent of a DOA is still there, but the requirement to do a DOA for all resources is not.
Okay, thanks, Matt. We have no more questions at this time.
All right, I'm going to pass it off to Ruth so she can start doing the walkthroughs for y'all.
Okay, our first demonstration is going to show type 1 categorical exclusion with a de minimis. And I do want to just point out that these demonstrations are just this tool. We're assuming for this demonstration that you know SWEPT, you know how to do a type 1 CE form, you know how to do a type 2 CE form for the next one. And of course, if you don't, we have videos of that online and we'll be pointing to different resources. But for today's webinar, we are focusing on this new tool. So bear with me for 1 minute. Well, less than a minute. There we go. So I am logged into SWEPT right now as a project data entry person, and I've started a type 1 CE form. You'll notice that I'm in the checklist, which just like normal, I can bring it up through my project documents, or I can go to the left menu and start from there. But when I get down to question 7, you'll notice that it's changed a little bit. There's a blue box here that lets you make a choice to either create the new section 4F using the form, or if you have one that you've already started the old way, you can just upload it. So I'm going to show you the new way. I click on that link and it brings up the form for that project. The very beginning of it, there's a lot of instructions there to help you get started. I'm going to close my left menu just to give me some more space. And the first page is a summary where I just indicate how many resources and I provide some basic information. I'm just going to start with one resource. So it adds a section to both this summary page and to a table of contents on the right. Notice as I enter the resource name, it updates the at the beginning, at the top of this section, and also over on the table of contents on the right. I just added some basic information about the facility type. I can indicate the property classification, the owner, and then I choose what the anticipated or recommended outcome is. And in this case, I'm picking a de minimis. You'll notice that there's a concurrent state there that I cannot edit. That will show up automatically later on. And I start by adding, project map and some basic information. And here I'm just making my title a little bit more English, plain language. And I can also add the address, which is searching for an address match, and then it adds a lat long as you go. Then once I've entered that basic information, I go to the detail page for that particular resource. And here I can fill in even more details. Like I forgot to put the property classification on the first page. So I'm going to add that, put the project description, answer the questions that come up about the de minimis, and describe the basis of the determination, and I indicate whether or not the public has been afforded an opportunity, and then describe that. I can also add additional comments if I want to let Roy or Matt know something about the project, you know, like I have a question or something, and I can add additional supporting documents. And then I just click the button to send the resource to OEM. There's also on the right a link that if I had wanted to send it to somebody else in the district for review, I could do that. But now I'm going to log in as OEM Cultural Resource Specialist, and they'll have received an email, but they can also go to their little table they have on there that shows the status and that they have something for review. And it brings up the form, and it looks very much the same as it does for the district. And the reason for that is because you guys might be talking about it. And so to see the same thing while you're talking about it is helpful. They cannot actually save anything though, except for their comments and their concurrence. So they look at the summary in this case, notice, oh, there's just the one resource. Okay, so they go in, and of course they're going to spend more time than I am on this demo, actually reading the information, seeing what you've provided, bring up your documents you've attached. They have the opportunity to discuss it with the OEM director and document when they've done that. And then when it's ready, they'll save their concurrence. If it's not ready, they would contact you and let you know if there's any issues. And then the district project team will get an email, and from that email, they'll get a link back to the form where they can see any comments or the concurrence of it. And they'll also notice that the approval history shows up at the bottom. Notice that it's no longer editable once the concurrence is. But if they needed to reopen it for edits, they could, or they can just say ready for approval and submit it. At this time, with the type 1, it will go up to OEM for approval once the district indicates that it is ready. Until it's approved, you will not be able to forward the type 1 for approval. So here, it's just notice it says, gives you a status of that form. Once it has been approved, though, you'll be able to go in and you'll get a notice saying that it's approved, but you also notice in the resource that it's been approved there as well. And so you can go back to your type 1 and it's been approved. And it was, it flashed a little bit too fast, sorry about that, but it also, once it's approved, it's attached as a PDF as supporting documentation back in your project file. And once you're, assuming everything else is ready for your type 1, you send it for approval and it continues on the same process as we've done for type 1s before. And you get your notice that it's in the approval process. So there's no additional changes at that point. So does anybody have any questions about that type 1 CE approval process?
Yes, Corey would like to know regarding the address link, is it possible to also link to the property appraiser site to link to the parcel data for ownership information?
We are not currently doing that, but we could put that down as a potential enhancement. Because it's on SWIFT, we do have links to information that's in our environmental screening tool. It's not, I can't remember off the top of my head the update cycle for that, but we could possibly provide some information. So we'll make a note of that and see about the feasibility and then report back on that.
Okay. Thanks, Ruth. Barbara would like to know, de minimis normally involves public involvement. Where is that documentation added?
One of the boxes that I showed in the details page was there's a question whether it has occurred yet or not, and then right under there is a comment box, and that is where you would document that. You would describe what that public involvement was. You can also attach any supporting documents as well, if you have it, in another document.
All right. Thanks, Ruth. Barbara would also like to know, for the type of resource, can you check more than one box? For example, a historic park and a historic park along with previous selections.
Steph, I'm going to defer to you on that. I did not actually test that, but I believe that you can. Is that correct?
Yes, for the property type, you can select multiple items there.
Great, thank you.
Let's see. Okay. Rudy would like to know, for historic properties, will the description of the Section 106 process suffice for the public involvement question?
Matt, that is a question for you.
Yeah, so nothing about the public involvement requirements or documentation changes. So if you have done sufficient public involvement during your Section 106 consultation process, then that will be, if that is sufficient for your Section 106, then that is still going to be sufficient to document here. So nothing about our public involvement requirements actually change.
Thanks, Matt. I do not see any further questions at this time.
Okay, so at this point, I will walk through the process with the type 2 that shows multiple resources and filling out a programmatic. So one moment while my screen updates. So here I am back in the Section 4F form as, again, a district person with data entry assigned to a project. Notice this time I've got 2 resources already started. They're in the table of contents on the right. I'm going to add another one, and I can do that by changing this number right here. I can also, at the bottom of the page, click a button that says Add Resources. So either way, I can do that. I'm going to fill in the information and for a programmatic. And one thing I do want to point out, all of this demonstration stuff is on our test server, and although we might actually have some actual names of projects and things for our examples, these are not real. They're all pretend. So just like before, I'm going to fill in the details, add my map, which, as you'll notice, I can either do that on the summary page or I can do it here, whichever is more convenient for you. Put in my description and the owner, I already did that. Programmatic. Since it's programmatic, I need to choose which type. So these are the same types as have always been used. And then I just answer yes or no. Does it meet all the following criteria? And all of this is just text that is provided in the PDF as well. And then I indicate one or more of those which apply. I indicate, here's Barbara, here is where the public has been afforded comment, the opportunity to comment. It's either yes or no. You just click either one, and then you summarize the activities outside of the public hearing. You don't need to document that because that's documented in the elsewhere, but it gives you a little bit of instructions, and you just put your text in the box to summarize it. If you have additional comments to provide to OEM or additional documents, you upload those. You can save a draft, come back to it later, or when it's ready to send to OEM, you send it to them. If at any time too that you've decided, oops, I didn't actually mean to send that right now, you can withdraw it and they'll get a notice about that as well. And at this time, because I have multiples and I've like, okay, they're all done, they're all ready to go, I am going to just go ahead and send all of these at the same time. Now, this is built on a resource basis, so you can just send these as they're complete. You don't have to do them all at the same time. And then, but I just wanted to show you could go through them. You can wait, send them as they're finished or later. And then Matt or Roy will go in and review everything, and they do basically the same thing they did when there was just one resource. They look at the summary, notice that there's 3 things, ready for concurrence or ready for determination, depending on the outcome type. And then they go through the details for each one. And then they either save their concurrence, or in the case of this particular one, it's a determination. So they can save that when it's ready. And again, if they have questions, they can call and you guys can talk about it and work things out. And here again is another, the last one was a concurrence. And they're saving it. And so now it's at a point that you can proceed in the type 2. When you get your email, it'll have a link to the form so you can see if there's any comments or anything. And then for each, again, it's on a resource basis. So for each resource, once it is ready to be processed, you just click each resource. Notice that that one was a determination, so it doesn't need any more approvals. So there was nothing else to do. But if it was a concurrence, you just need to indicate that it is ready. And basically the system, all the system is looking for is if it has a concurrence and it has indicated there's public involvement. And if both of those cases, it will allow you to click the approval. Now I'm going to just show you what this looks like on the type 2 categorical exclusion form. I'm just opening a form, and you'll notice that down in the, that went a little bit fast. Let me just go back a teeny bit. At the, probably went too far. Yeah. Okay, so here we are at going to the cultural resources where the section 4F stuff is found. And it's going to ask you if it's present, you click yes. If it's a individual, you would say yes or no. The form is only for things that are not individual. So once you've clicked no for, say, present and no, then you have the option down here to include this new section 4F resource form as an attachment. We have both options available right now, as Matt indicated before. So if you still are using the old forms, you have the ability to upload those. But if you've filled out the section 4F resource form on SWEPT and have all the information and stuff, you do not need to add any additional information. It's all going to be in that section 4F resource attachment. But again, it's your option whether to use that new form or not. And once that is ready, now that part's ready. Once your type 2 CE is ready, it will process just like a normal type 2 CE that you've attached to other things, going through that same process for approval. And the section 4F document will be approved by the OEM director at the same time as the type 2 CE form. So are there any questions?
Yes. Todd would like to know, how will this tool translate into the reevaluation forms? Will this tool auto-populate information into the reevaluation form for the 4F section?
Steph, you can probably describe that for us.
Yes. It will not, the reevaluation form will not be auto-populated with any of the data from the 4F form, but it does know that you've created a section 4F document and that it will be linked to the form similar to the type 2, but it doesn't actually auto-populate information into the reevaluation form itself.
So again, you still have the option, if you know that that form is what applies to that reeval, you can click on the check mark and include it, or you can upload other information from previous or updated information if needed. We're kind of in this transition period that, as Matt was describing, where you can choose which way makes sense for your project.
Thank you. Christy has a general question about the project description. With all of the other SWEP forms in the old form, or I'm sorry, the old forms require that you add a project description to them. For the online section 4F tools, do we need to include the project description somewhere?
I'm trying to remember. And Steph, you might need to correct me on this. Is that the resource description or the project description that's being asked for in this section 4F?
It's the resource description, and then Christy is asking about, do they need to include the project description anywhere in there?
Is there
I can jump in and answer this one.
Thank you.
So the old forms did require a project description. Right now, the tool does not require a project description. And our thought process there was that this form is linked to an FM number, which brings you to a project file in SWEPT, which is one of the places where the project description lives. So we didn't feel the need to require you to restate the project description in the 4F form. But if you all start using the form and feel like it would be really useful to include the project description in the form as well, then we can work on adding that into the tool.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay. Let's see. Next question is from Sherry. We recently received an email to use DocuSign to send Section 4F DOA for OEM approval. Would this eliminate the DocuSign approval?
I can take that one too. So the DocuSign procedure is something that we put into action as a response to everybody working from home because so many of us don't have printers and scanners so that we can print out paper forms, sign them, scan them, and get them back to you. So the DocuSign procedure is only for the old Section 4F forms. So if you continue to use the old forms, then you will continue needing to use DocuSign for as long as well working from home. If you start using the tool, there is no need for DocuSign because all of the approvals happen just by pushing buttons in Swift.
Thank you. The next question is from Kelsey. With the DOA form, the district approves the DOA and then it goes to OEM to approve. With this new tool, does the district approve at any point or is the approval entirely with OEM?
So I'll take this one as well, and Ruth and Stephanie let me know if this is accurate. But there is not a formal approval that is required by the district, but there is an option to send your resources to district personnel for review.
That is correct.
Okay.
Let's see. Wait a few seconds. I do not see any questions at this time. Any further questions? Ruth, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes. As Matt
Do
mentioned.
we need to show a PDF before?
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
did mean to show you guys what the PDF output looks like. So, and I just have to reiterate, we just pulled a bunch of information from a bunch of projects so we could just show how it looked like. So this is not a real live project. So that's why for training purposes only is on this document. That will not be showing up for a real project. But it gives the basic cover page with the basic information about the project, our standard statement about the NEPA assignment, and then the table of contents. The first page is that summary form, and then there's a separate section for the details and additional attachments. So the summary page is pretty simple. This one, I'm just showing a PDF that was created while it was in draft. You know, this might be something that you would send around in your district or something. You can always PDF just like our other SWEP forms. But so it gives it would have the date if this was determined or if there was a concurrence, and then if it was signed, Jason's signature would show up right there. And then it starts going through the individual details with the information that was provided on those forms. And, you know, gives the description of the property, the owner, recommended outcomes. The description, the form for the next resource. And then the attachments are organized by the project as well. For each resource, sorry, not for the project, for each resource, it has a table of contents, and then it starts in with whatever attachments have been added, starting with the project maps. And that basically gives you an idea of what this final product would look like. So as I was saying, we are planning on having this ready for you Monday morning. If you have questions about using SWEPT, we did put our quick reference in the handout for the webinar that you can download, or you can get it from the help quick guide section on SWEPT. We will post this webinar recording under our SWEPT training on our website and also link it on SWEPT itself. So if you don't have access to SWEPT and you just want to learn more about SWEPT, you can go to our training program page. Here's the link and learn more about SWEPT. And like I said, the recording for this webinar will be located there as well. And with that, we just wanted to open it up again for any more discussion. Does anybody have any more questions?
Gordon would like to,
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. Gordon would like to know, is there an option to create an instant PDF of the 4F forms for review, kind of similar to how we do for the Type 2 reeval?
An instant you mean having the there's anytime once you've started the section 4F, you can click the big PDF button at the top of the page and it'll create a PDF. The final PDF with the signatures is automatically created once the signatures, approval signatures are put on it. So at approval, there'll be an official PDF, but you can always click the PDF button at the top of the page to create a PDF at any time.
Right. Thank you. Let's see. And no further questions at this time.
Okay, well, if you think of something later, if it's a process or guidance question about Section 4F, you know how to get a hold of Matt or Roy. And if it's SWEPT assistance, Stephanie's at the help desk, and I'm available as well. So you can email us or give us a call, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you, everybody. If there's no further questions,
you all.
yeah. If there's no further questions, that ends our webinar. Thank you all for joining us.